Hello everyone. Welcome to another stream. It is time for chapter 19 of Things Fall Apart with Mr. Ocampo. Hello again. Nice to see you all. For those of you who are live and for those of you who are watching the video, thank you for picking up on this. We are at chapter 19. We're getting close to the end here and we're starting to see things start to pick up with Things Fall Apart. There's a lot of issues that are being caused because of the missionaries who are converting the African people, who are sharing their culture and causing conflict with the existing systems that we've spent so long learning about. In the last chapter, they were able to build a home. The church in the evil forest is gaining ground. They're able to get more converts. But some of the issues that arise are they're gaining converts who are considered outcasts by the African people, and there's a bit of a conflict there for the new converts. The Christian converts are saying like, hey, according to my tradition, these people are not good people. They're outcasts. They're not cool. But according to Christianity, I should love everyone regardless. So I'm stuck with a conflict. Do I believe in the traditional part of my culture or do I believe in this new culture that I've agreed to be part of? What do I do? And that's one of my essential questions for you today. What do you do when you have multiple cultural identities that are in conflict? There were some people who chose to ditch one culture over the other. Some people went back to the Igbo ways and forsook Christianity for taking in the they're called Osu, the outcasts of the Igbo tribe. And there were some who embraced it and were like, hey, yeah, we're all welcome here. We're all Christians. We're all sons and daughters of God. So we're all the same. And that caused a bit of an issue. There was also an issue with the religion itself. With zealots on one side saying, hey, your gods are false, we don't acknowledge it. And there was a snake that was killed, the royal python. And I think the main takeaway there was the Igbo beliefs. The Igbo people were like, hey, you know what? Let's not drive these people out of the evil forest for killing our royal python god. Let's see if our god does anything. And lo and behold, the person that supposedly killed that snake ended up dying. Now, whether or not you believe it was the work of God, that's up to you. But I think that maybe if you fight with a python and you get bitten, you're probably going to die. So that might have been what happened. But at the end of the chapter, the Igbo people are their desires for revenge are satiated. They decide not to impose all these restrictions on the Christians and say like, hey, you can go use the stream again. All right, so we are in chapter 19. Let's see if anything else changes. The last big rains of the year were falling. It was the time for treading red earth with which to build walls. It was not done earlier because the rains were too heavy and would have washed away the heap of trodden earth. And it could not be done later because harvesting would soon set in, and after that, the dry season. It was going to be Okonkwo's last harvest in Mbanta. The 7 wasted and weary years were at last dragging to a close. Although he had prospered in his motherland, Okonkwo knew that he would have prospered even more in Umofia, in the land of his fathers, where men were bold and warlike. In these 7 years, he would have climbed to the utmost heights, and so he regretted every day of his exile. His mother's kinsmen had been very kind to him, and he was grateful. But that did not alter the facts. He had called the first child born to him in exile Nneka, Mother Supreme, out of politeness to his mother's kinsmen. But 2 years later, when a son was born, he called him Nwofia, begotten in the wilderness. As soon as he entered his last year in exile, Okonkwo sent money to Obierka to build him 2 huts in his old compound, where he and his family would live until he built more huts in the outside wall of his compound. He could not ask another man to build his own obi for him, nor the walls of his compound. those things a man built for himself or inherited from his father. Wait. Oh, Okonkwo was like, yo, get ready for my comeback, all right? Obierka, here's some money. I need you to get my pad ready. But Okonkwo has to build his own walls and his own obi, his own stuff. So that's pretty cool. As the last heavy rains of the year began to fall, Obierka sent word that the 2 huts had been built, and Okonkwo began to prepare for his return after the rains. He would have liked to return earlier and build his compound that year before the rain stopped, but in doing so, he would have taken something from the full penalty of 7 years, and that could not be. So he waited impatiently for the dry season to come. It came slowly. The rain became lighter and lighter until it fell in slanting showers. Sometimes the sun shone through the rain and a light breeze blew. It was a gay and airy kind of rain. The rainbow began to appear, and sometimes 2 rainbows, like a mother and her daughter, the one young and beautiful, the other an old and faint shadow. The rainbow was called the python of the sky. Oh, it's more imagery of how much the Igbo culture reveres the python. Okonkwo called his 3 wives and told them to get things together for a great feast. I must thank my mother's kinsmen before I go, he said. Akwefi still had some cassava left on her farm from the previous year. Neither of the other wives had. It was not that they had been lazy, but that they had many children to feed. It was therefore understood that Akwefi should provide a cassava for the feast. Remember, Akwefi only has 1 child, her daughter Azima. And Woye's mother and Ojiugo would provide the other things like smoked fish, palm oil, and pepper for the soup. Okonkwo would take care of meat and yams. Akwefi rose early on the following morning and went to her farm with her daughter Azima and Ojiugo's daughter, Ogbiejeli, to harvest cassava tubers. Each of them carried a long cane basket, a machete for cutting down the soft cassava stem, and a little hoe for digging out the tuber. Fortunately, a light rain had fallen during the night, and the soil would not be very hard. It will not take us long to harvest as much as we like, said Akwefi. But the leaves will be wet, said Azima. Her basket was balanced on her head, and her arms folded across her breasts. She felt cold. I dislike cold water dropping on my back. We should have waited for the sun to rise and dry the leaves. Obiajeli called her Salt because she said that she disliked water. Are you afraid you may dissolve? The harvesting was easy, as Akwefi had said. Azima shook every tree violently with a long stick before she bent down to cut the stem and dig out the tuber. Sometimes it was not necessary to dig. They just pulled the stump and earth rose. Roots snapped below and the tuber was pulled out. When they had harvested a sizable heap, they carried it down in 2 trips to the stream, where every woman had a shallow well for fermenting her cassava. It should be ready in 4 days or even 3, said Obiejeli. They are young tubers. They are not all that young, said Akwefi. I planted the farm nearly 2 years ago. It is a poor soil, and that is why the tubers are so small. Okonkwo never did things by halves. When his wife Akwefi protested that 2 goats were sufficient for the feast, he told her that it was not her affair. What does that mean? He never did things by halves. I don't know. Maybe he's just not used to asking for help. I don't know. I have no idea. I am calling a feast because I have the wherewithal. I cannot live on the bank of a river and wash my hands with spittle. Oh, it's those proverbs again. What does that mean? Oh, right. It's so I cannot live on the bank of a river and wash my hands with spittle. Like, why would you wash your hands with your spit when there's like a perfectly good river nearby? That makes sense. Hey, good morning, Krino. Welcome to class. How's it going? You enjoying your Wednesday so far? We are like halfway through chapter 19. This is a fast one. So far, it's just, Akwefi, Azima, they're all just preparing a feast for Okonkwo's, it's Okonkwo's, farewell feast for his mother's side of the family as a thank you for, taking him in while he's in exile. That's pretty cool. So, let's see. Here we go. Oh, okay. So Okonkwo, he doesn't, I guess, he's not very frugal, I guess, or like when it says never did things by halves, it's like he's not going to shortchange him. He's gonna go all out. Okonkwo always goes all out. I think that's what it means. I am calling a feast because I have the wherewithal. Oh, I have the ability to. I have the ability to call a feast. So we're gonna feast. We're not just gonna have like two goats and call it a feast. No, we're gonna do more than that. That's why. And so, 3 goats were slaughtered and a number of fowls. It was like a wedding feast. There was fufu and yam pottage, a goosey soup, and bitter leaf soup, and pots of palm wine. All the Umuna were invited to the feast, all the descendants of Okolo who had lived about 200 years before. The oldest member of this extensive family was Okonkwo's uncle, Uchendu. The kola nut was given to him to break, and he prayed to the ancestors. He asked them for health and children. We do not ask for wealth because he that has health and children will also have wealth. We do not pray to have more money, but to have more kinsmen. We are better than animals because we have kinsmen. An animal rubs its itching flank against a tree. A man asks his kinsman to scratch him. He prayed especially for Okonkwo and his family. He then broke the kola nut and threw one of the lobes on the ground for the ancestors. That's neat. I like what he's saying here. It's like what makes us different from us and the animals is that we have family. That's pretty cool. Like he puts an emphasis on family, especially since like this is Okonkwo's farewell to his mother's side of the family. That's pretty cool. I like Uchendu. I like him a lot. As the broken kola nuts were passed round, Okonkwo's wives and children and those who came to help them with the cooking began to bring out the food. His sons brought out the pots of palm wine. There was so much food and drink that many kinsmen whistled in surprise. When all was laid out, Okonkwo rose to speak. I beg you to accept this little kola, he said. It is not to pay you back for all you did for me in all these 7 years. A child cannot pay for its mother's milk. I have only called you together because it is good for kinsmen to eat meat. I like that. Okonkwo is he's a good orator. He's got a strong like leader presence. Yam pottage was served first because it was lighter than fufu and because yam always came first. Then the fufu was served. Some kinsmen ate it with a goosey soup and others with bitter leaf soup. The meat was then shared so that every member of the umuna had a portion. Every man rose in order of years and took a share. Even the few kinsmen who had not been able to come had their shares taken out for them in due term. As the palm wine was drunk, one of the oldest members of the umuna rose to thank Okonkwo. If I say that we did not expect such a big feast, I will be suggesting that we did not know how open-handed our son Okonkwo is. We all know him, and we expected a big feast. But it turned out to be even bigger than we expected. Thank you. May all you took out return again tenfold. It is good, in these days when the younger generation consider themselves wiser than their sires, to see a man doing things in the grand old way. A man who calls his kinsmen to a feast does not do so to save them from starving. Wait. They all have food in their own homes. When we gather together in the moonlit village ground, it is not because of the moon. Every man can see it in his own compound. We come together because it is good for kinsmen to do so. You may ask why I'm saying all this. I say it because I fear for the younger generation. For you people. Ooh, it's the boomers telling Gen Z what's up. Okay. He waved his arm where most of the young men sat. As for me, I have only a short while to live, and so have Uchendu, and Unachuku, and Umefo. But I fear for you, young people, because you do not understand how strong is the bond of kinship. You do not know what it is to speak with one voice. And what is the result? An abominable religion has settled among you. A man can now leave his father and his brothers. He can curse the gods of his fathers and his ancestors. like a hunter's dog that suddenly goes mad and turns on his master. I fear for you. I fear for the clan. He turned again to Okonkwo and said, thank you for calling us together. Ooh. Ooh, that's big. You know why that's big? That is big because in the last two chapters, we saw the Christian people start to split up the African people, right? What this guy is suggesting, one of Okonkwo's like relatives, is suggesting. It's been suggested throughout. Family is number one. You stick together, right? You don't let anything break you apart. And together they have a strong voice. They could have opposed this new culture, this new religion, these new people and their ways. This guy is acknowledging that this new generation, they don't follow the old traditions. They don't follow the old ways. And you saw that with Nwoye. I wonder how many of you would agree with this guy, would agree that it's more important to stick to the old ways, to stick with family and tradition. Or how many of you would agree with Nwoye to adapt to your situation, to take the best out of what's coming to you and to change if necessary? Because that's what he did. And Nwoye saw that his situation was not for him. And he left. And I asked a lot of you, what would you do if you're presented with a toxic environment? Would you stay and tough it out, or would you leave? And then I asked you further, what if it were family? Would you stay and tough it out, or would you leave? And that's pretty big. I wonder how you would all answer. Would you take Nwoye's side, or would you say, it looks like this is Okonkwo's side. Okonkwo wants to preserve the old ways, the ancestors and their gods and the traditions, whereas Nwoye embraces the new, the Christianity and the new ideas that it brought. So this might be a conversation that we'll have in class. This definitely sounds like something that I would like to, maybe have as an assignment for your summative grade. I don't know. It's just something to think about, and I hope you recognize that there's this big issue that still happens today. Do we stick with our traditions and our family values, or do we see new ideas and see new ways to define family, and adapt to a new reality? I can't tell you which way to think, but I wonder if you're thinking of it, because this is pretty important, because we see how much the African culture is changing as a result of the new way. So anyways, that is chapter 19. Let's take a look at some of the questions that we have. Although he had prospered in his motherland, Okonkwo knew that he would have prospered even more in Umofia, in the land of his fathers, where men were bold and warlike. In these 7 years, he would have climbed to the utmost heights, and so he regretted every day of his exile. His mother, kinsman, had been very kind to him, and he was grateful, but that did not alter the facts. Did Okonkwo learn his lesson about being too prideful during his exile, or is he back to being the same old Okonkwo? I think he's still the same old Okonkwo. He regrets everything. He regrets not being able to, make something of himself. He didn't... He's very set in his ways, if you couldn't tell. He's very set in, I need to be the best, so on and so forth. I don't think he changed at all. Like, in these 7 years, he would have climbed to the utmost heights. He's still regretting, things that he didn't do. But, I mean, like, dude, you took care of your family. It sounds like he had 2 kids while he was away, and he became, a leader in his motherland. That's nothing to just drop. What do you predict will happen when Okonkwo returns to Umofia? Will he be a better person, or will he go back to his violent ways? I think he's going to go back to his violent ways. But I don't know. I think he just prefers being warlike. That's why he's longing for Umofia. I'm pretty sure he believes that Umofia would have kicked out the missionaries. He would have fought them, right? But there was a little bit of a hint in the last chapter that suggested that they've already built a church in Umofia. They built their headquarters there. So if that's true and Okonkwo comes back, he might be in for a big surprise. Did Okonkwo learn his lesson about being too prideful? Oh, wait, this is just broken down. No, so those are the two questions. There we go. So that's chapter 19, folks. I hope you enjoyed today's reading. Very short. Very short. We shot right through that. I hope that I explained it well. All that happened in this chapter is Okonkwo threw a feast for his family. But we see that there's a division between the old generation and the new generation. And I know I asked this question before about, like, you know, what do you think about when like the boomer generation criticizes millennials or Gen Z? How does that make you feel in regards to, like, you know, do they have a right to say that? And it's a completely different time. And you all shared your thoughts. They're doing it again. And I just want to know, like, what do you think about it? What do you think about this whole scene of people saying, like, hey, we feel sorry for you, for your generation because you have it hard. You have this, you know, you have these challenges that if you just stuck with the old ways, you wouldn't have any problems. But hey, I'll leave the thinking up to you. If you have any questions about this chapter or how to break it down, please feel free to leave a comment or shoot me a message, email me or whatever. But we'll be in class talking about it. And then next week, we're moving on to chapter 20 and 21. We're almost to the end of the book, folks. And I'm going to guess that next chapter, Okonkwo is going to go back home and see what has changed and potentially what has fallen apart. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And